Howdy, friends and neighbors. Mr. Rogers. I did not change my shoes. I did put a jacket on for the meeting today. We are going to start at 12 o'clock instead of 12:07 today because we have two speakers. It's very interesting. We started out with a lead on one or two that didn't work out. Then we had none. Then we had two. Then we had maybe three. Then it went back to just me. And we finally settled on me and Commissioner Mark Hader from Canadian County. So we'll have an action-packed meeting today. And I brought out the stool because the stool helps me relax and be less serious. And I'm going to try not to be too serious today, although I do want to have a heart-to-heart chat. Now I want to talk about something a little bit difficult for me, personally, for a couple of reasons, because I'm going to share with you something that requires my personal confession and repentance. And I think it will also be difficult because maybe some of you in the room will actually disagree with what I'm going to say. I hope not, but again, as Charlie always called himself, a benevolent dictator. And he still is. And I'm not the dictator, and sometimes I'm not even benevolent, but I will say I can't tell you how to vote when we vote on things in this club. I really don't run the club. This is our club. I MC the meetings and try and put out a newsletter that's witty sometimes and speaks some truth, trying to be like Charlie, but again, I'm only in year number 1, and he did 24, so please be patient with me. So you may not agree with what I'm going to say, and you may not even go along with what I'm going to say, but I feel like I need to anyway. This has been building inside of me for about a year, and has really come to a head in the last few weeks, and so I'm going to build on some things that Matt Trewhella said in our banquet. Is there anyone here today who was not at the banquet? Raise your hand if you were not at the banquet. So we're about half and half. He said some things there that brought all of us to our feet. We were applauding everything he said. I had legislators come up to me afterwards and say, wow, he said some hard things, but boy, they needed to be said. And so the question came to my mind, do we really fully understand what he said? I want to actually go into some detail, because if we actually do agree with some of the things he said, what's that going to look like? And it's going to be doing some things differently than we've done them before. Because if we continue to do what we've always done before and expect a different result, that's madness. So I want to set the stage for this discussion by showing you this video first. I did post it on Facebook a couple of days ago. Did any of you watch the Dead Rose Day video? Okay, this is just 2 minutes. We'll watch this, and this will launch our discussion.
Oklahoma, the most pro-life state in the Union, where innocent children are murdered every day. We've looked to our legislators to put an end to this great evil. We've placed our faith in them, hoping that the right senator, the right congressman, the right governor will finally do something to protect our preborn neighbors. But we were wrong. Children are being poisoned, crushed, and dismembered by the people of Oklahoma. And our governing authorities stand by and do nothing. Year after year, we give them roses to encourage them to pass pro-life laws. And to what end? 6,000 children are aborted every year in compliance with their laws. It's time the people of Oklahoma said, enough. Enough with the pro-life platitudes. Enough with the empty pro-life promises. Enough compromise. 44 years of regulated child sacrifice is enough. We are done congratulating these compromised officials for their half-hearted efforts. We are done celebrating their so-called victories. Children are being torn apart on their watch, on our watch. It's time we demand the abolition of abortion.
So let's talk a little bit about this. Let's start with a history lesson. Now, we could do this history lesson in different ways. We could go back 43 years, we could go back 10 years, we could go back 5 years. But history keeps repeating itself, so let's just do the last 2 years and make the same point, shall we? Let's begin with Senate Bill 1848. It was passed in 2014. It was authored by Randy Graw. It was used on the conservative index as a pro-life bill. The law requires physicians performing abortions in Oklahoma to have admitting privileges at a hospital within 30 miles of the clinic. The bill was immediately challenged in court. It never went into effect. What is the status of that bill today, 2 years later? Well, just the other day, on February the 11th, Oklahoma County District Judge Don Andrews, opined that Senate Bill 1848 was actually constitutional. He said the state does have an interest in the health and well-being of its citizens. So he said it could go forward. But guess what? This bill's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to take effect until further order from the Oklahoma Supreme Court. Will the Oklahoma Supreme Court uphold that lower court's opinion? What do you think?
No.
That was from 2014. Now let's look at 2015. In 2015, we passed House Bill 1721. It was used on the conservative index as a pro-life bill. The law bans dismemberment abortion, and the bill was immediately challenged in court. What's the status of that bill? Well, just on October of last year, Oklahoma County District Judge Patricia Parrish issued an injunction to block enforcement of that bill. Will the Oklahoma Supreme Court uphold that lower court's opinion?
Yes.
Probably so. But again, the bill from 2014 is still stuck in the courts 2 years later and has done nothing. So if we keep doing what we've always been doing and expecting something different, it's madness. Let's talk about the problems. Let's talk about why almost 6,000 children last year were killed in abortion clinics in Oklahoma. We've got 3 specific problems that I can identify. First of all, we've got a practical problem. You want to get that? It might be for me. The practical problem is that these bills are getting tied up in the courts, and whatever they were intended to do, they're not doing. And so nothing is changing. That on the surface of it is the first problem. Just that the fact that the bills are not going into effect or doing anything that they were intended to do, that should tell us that there's a problem. All right, problem number 2 is a tactical problem, a problem of strategy. And here's what everyone needs to wake up and realize. First of all, we've agreed to play an evil game with diabolical rules. We aren't setting the terms. We're reacting and responding to what the evil one is doing around us with the courts and with these political games. Year after year, the same thing keeps happening and nothing is changing because we're agreeing to play their game. What we don't realize is that we're actually caught in a Hegelian dialectic. We keep getting offered bad, worse, and horrible choices and thinking those are the only things from which we have to choose. And so we end up picking the lesser of evils, thinking that's all that we can get, and we get nothing or things get worse. That's what's happening. Practically on this issue, what that looks like is that every time we think we can, well, what's being sold to us is this idea that we can never accomplish the total abolition of abortion. Therefore, what you guys need to do is you need to just accept further regulation. That's the kind of laws that you need to be trying to pass, because you'll never get total abolition. And we buy into that and we go along with that, and nothing ever changes. So what that does is it leaves us with the nibblings. So if you were at the banquet 2 weeks ago, Friday, when Matt Trella spoke, he talked about the nibblings, the leftovers, the stuff that gets thrown out as trash. You think you're getting something to eat, but it's garbage. We get the nibblings. And so then Matt and I were talking about what's happening and why it happens and how it happens. So we spent 2 afternoons in a coffee shop together, and we built this slide that we call a cozy arrangement. You remember that? There's a cozy arrangement between certain organizations that keep the status quo on these pro-life things going round and round and nothing ever changes. So this looks pretty cozy, doesn't it? Well, let's explain who's who in this photograph. First of all, you have your typical pro-life lobbyist as the little kitty cat. These are people like Tony Lowinger at Oklahoma for Life, who year after year push these incremental, worthless bills. And so he's nice and cozy in whose lap? The GOP establishment's lap. You have all of these candidates who claim to be pro-life, and what do? They sign on and they put these bills forward, and everyone signs on to them because, oh, that's the pro-life bill we're going to do this year, so we can all say that we're pro-life. And at the end of the day, these candidates and legislators come out and say, look, I have a perfect record. I'm 100% pro-life. Aren't we awesome? And then Tony and the pro-life lobbyists get to come back next year and keep their job because they know nothing's going to change. And the legislators get to keep claiming that they're pro-life. And it just goes round and round and nothing ever changes. Pretty cozy, isn't it? Something has to drastically change. So here's what I think. We have one more problem to discuss, and that's the moral problem. Right now, we've just been talking about the strategic problem and that nothing ever changes. But when we let ourselves get caught in this trap and play this game, we have a moral problem. Because abortion is a black and white, life and death, absolute, universal moral principle. It's wrong to kill innocent human beings. They are our neighbors. They have the same intrinsic value that you and I have, and they're being killed. And that's absolutely wrong. This is not a question of whether or not you should wear a seatbelt or smoke in public or how fast you should drive on the highway. We can dicker around about that stuff. But we've been dickering around about lives. That's the moral problem. And so we've become complicit. Because abortion has been talked about for over 4 decades, we've lost the sense of urgency, we've lost the sense of meaning, we've lost the sense of death and destruction and murder that surrounds the issue. We've become numb to it. And so for a moment, why don't we just take abortion off the table and talk about something else so that we can make sense of it again? I say consider the rape analogy. What if in 1973 the Supreme Court had found a right to rape little girls as long as you do it privately in a safe clinic? What if we had rape rooms set up in every major metro area where you could take these girls and abuse them legally as long as it's done in private? That's the kind of thing we're talking about. And so the trap we've been caught in is running the kinds of legislation that say, well, you know what, we think it might be a good idea to restrict rape on Friday nights, but every other night it would be okay. And so maybe we pass a bill that says you can't rape anybody between 7 and 9 p.m. on Friday night. We go, yes, we're anti-rape. We're for justice. But are you really? That's the problem. That's what we're doing. Or in the case of Graw's bill from 2 years ago, we passed a bill that essentially said, well, you can rape anybody you want as long as it's within 30 miles of a clinic. And we put it on our conservative index, folks. I was there too. I voted for that. That's why I'm publicly repenting today. Amen. To accept incrementalism on this is the same as condoning murder. That's my belief. I don't know if you agree with me or not, but that's what my conscience is telling me. Amen. So let's go back. What have we learned from history? What has history taught us? History has taught us that by approving Senate Bill 1848, we condone murder as long as it's done near a hospital. And last year, by approving House Bill 1721, we condoned murder because we knew that that bill would protect no one. Now, I know all of you weren't there, but several of you were there last April or May, don't remember the exact week, when I brought the actual bill, 1721, and I went through it with you all. I had highlighted the phrases and explained to you why, that even if it did go into effect, it would not save any lives. It's full of loopholes. And then we voted to use it on the conservative index to determine whether or not someone was really pro-life. And I'm responsible for that too. And I'm repenting. I'm telling you that we used that bill in 180 degrees the wrong way. And we should have used the bill. And everyone who voted for it, instead of some bill that would have ended abortion in our state, should have been given a liberal vote. That's what I think. And we have a chance this year to do something different. Because the bill that they're trying to put forward now that would take licenses away from doctors who perform abortion would have the effect of ending abortion, and it's principled. It admits that as a doctor, you shouldn't do that. It's morally reprehensible and it's wrong, therefore you're not licensed to practice in the state. In good conscience and for principled reasons, we can put that on our index and use it as the litmus test for who's pro-life and who's not. That bill's got to get out of committee. I don't know where it is. I can't get anybody to answer me on if it's going to get a hearing or not. But when we find out who we need to call, we need to make sure these bills stay alive. Because we have over 40 legislators on tape, in person, in writing, in various settings have said, I'm for that, I'll sign on to that. If there's really that many on board with it, it should have no trouble flying through the legislature and getting passed. And we will find out where these guys stand. But we've got to be strong on it this year, and I hope you'll be with me on that. I hope this year when we look at the index, there will be a real bill to put on the index. And if not, let's not put a bill on there that doesn't mean anything. We'd be better off not having anything in that category or giving them all a liberal vote for not doing anything one more year, letting more killing continue.
Amen.
So my conclusion is that I think we've been naive and we've been guilty. To be naive means to fall for the lie, to get duped, to go along with it. And to be guilty means to be a party to or complicit to evil. I think we've been both of those things, whether we intended to or not. And I'm not saying that Tony Lowinger and Randy Grawl, for example, are bad people or don't mean well. But I think they've believed the lies. And we need to take the blinders off of them and ask them to join with us fighting for justice and righteousness. So we've been naive and guilty, but what does Jesus say? He says, on the other hand, be as shrewd as snakes and innocent as doves. We must be wise. We must be shrewd. We must not step into these traps and play their games. We must aggressively set the standard, hold the standard high, and set the rules of a righteous game and remain innocent. The ends do not justify the means. We cannot vote for evil bills thinking there will be a good outcome. The ends do not justify the means, and we must stay innocent in our dealings. And finally, no more playing the enemy's game. I've said that. And so no more positive pro-life ratings from our group without total abolition. That's what I think we need to do. And that's the conclusion I was working to find out if you will be with me on that. I'm only one vote. We'll have 200 voting members. When we get to this summer and we vote on whether or not these guys are pro-life or not, what are we going to do? I'm going to be arguing along these lines, and I hope that you will be with me. I would like to, in a perfect world, write a piece and publish it in the Oklahoma Constitution newspaper and in our blog and put the world on notice that we're not playing this game anymore, and this year there will be no pro-life ratings from our group unless it's total abolition.